Two corrupt cops decided to humiliate a woman reading in a park. They used a baton to lift her dress. They didn't know the woman was a decorated army captain, and the district attorney's daughter. Justice was coming. The afternoon sun hung low over Jefferson Park, filtering gold through the leaves of a sprawling willow tree. For Captain Eva Rostova, U.S. Army, retired, this small pocket of green in the heart of Atlanta was supposed to be a sanctuary. At 35, she was learning to navigate the disorienting quiet of civilian life after a decade as a military intelligence analyst. The skills that had kept her alive in Kandahar, hypervigilance, threat assessment, an intimate understanding of human cruelty, were ill-suited for a peaceful afternoon with a book. They were ghosts that whispered at the edges of her calm, reminders of a life she was trying to leave behind. She wore a simple, sunlit yellow linen dress, a birthday gift from her father. It felt foreign against her skin, too soft, too vulnerable. Her typical attire was jeans and a practical jacket, clothes you could move in. But she was trying. Trying to be the woman who could sit in a park and read, not the soldier who scanned every face for threats. The PTSD, a parting gift from her last tour, was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of her life. Some days it was a whisper, other days, a roar. Today, she prayed for a whisper. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of cut grass and distant city traffic, and tried to lose herself in the novel resting on her lap. For a few blissful minutes, it worked. The world narrowed to the printed words, the quiet rustle of leaves, the gentle warmth of the sun. It was a fragile peace, but it was peace nonetheless. And then, it was shattered. Well, well. Look what we have here. The voice was a smear of sound, loud and mocking, cracking through the tranquility like a boot on glass. Eva's body went rigid. Every ounce of her training screamed to life. Her head snapped up, her eyes instantly assessing the threat. Two uniformed police officers were walking toward her, their path a deliberate, predatory line across the grass. The first, the one who had spoken, was older, stockier, his face blotched red with a mixture of heat and arrogance. His badge read, Officer Travis Maddox. He wore a crooked smirk like a holstered weapon. The second officer, younger and thinner, trailed a few steps behind. His name tag identified him as Luke Davidson. He wasn't smirking, but his silence was a form of consent, a quiet complicity that was just as menacing. Eva's heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. This wasn't a routine patrol. She could see it in the way Maddox's eyes dragged over her, a slow, appraising scan that stripped her of her humanity, reducing her to an object, a problem, a target. She felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. She recognized the look. It was the look of a predator who knows his prey is alone. She slowly closed her book, placing it gently on the bench beside her. She didn't stand, not yet. Standing was a challenge, and she knew better than to escalate without more information. She kept her hands visible, her posture non-threatening. "Can I help you, officers?" she asked, her voice perfectly even, a testament to years of training in how to mask fear. Maddox chuckled, a low, greasy sound. "I don't know. Can you? We're just making sure our public parks are safe. And you, sitting here all alone in your pretty little dress, you don't look very safe." The veiled threat was clear. He wasn't here to protect her. He was the danger she needed protection from. Eva's mind raced. She knew who these men were, not personally, but she knew their type. They were the reason her father, District Attorney Alexander Rostova, had launched his aggressive, citywide crusade against police corruption. They were the old guard, the ones who saw reform as a personal attack, who saw accountability as a threat. And as Maddox stepped closer, a flicker of recognition in his eyes confirmed her worst fear. He knew who she was. This wasn't random. This was a message. "I'm perfectly fine, officer," Eva said, her voice turning cold, a deliberate layer of ice over the fire of her rising anger. "I was enjoying a book." "Is that against park regulations?" Maddox's smirk widened. He relished the confrontation. Depends on the book. Depends on the person reading it. He stopped directly in front of her, his shadow falling over her, blotting out the sun. His partner, Davidson, shifted nervously behind him, his eyes darting from Maddox to Eva, a man clearly caught in a tide too strong for him to swim against. I hear your father is making quite a name for himself, Maddox continued, his voice dripping with sarcastic venom. The great reformer. Cleaning up the department. Telling us how to do our jobs. He leaned down, bringing his face closer to hers. His breath was sour with coffee and contempt. He thinks he can just change everything. Thinks he can put good cops on the defensive. Eva's blood ran cold. It was exactly as she'd feared. This was a targeted act of intimidation, aimed not just at her, but at her father. They were using her to send a message. My father's work has nothing to do with me sitting in a park, she said, her words clipped and precise. Oh, I think it does, Maddox sneered. I think it has everything to do with it. It's about respect. Something your daddy doesn't seem to have for the men and women in blue who keep this city safe. He gestured vaguely at her yellow dress. He buys you pretty things, sends you to fancy schools, but he doesn't teach you that some people are off limits to his political games. The sheer audacity of it, the twisted logic, left Eva momentarily speechless. She felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage, so hot it almost choked her. But her training held. Emotion was a liability. She needed to stay in control. You are harassing me, Officer Maddox, she stated, her voice a low warning. I would like you to step away from me now. Or what? He taunted. You gonna call your daddy? Tell him the big, bad policeman was mean to you. And then, it happened. In one fluid, practiced, and utterly despicable motion, Maddox jabbed his metal baton under the hem of her dress. He didn't touch her skin. He didn't have to. The act was the violation. With a flick of his wrist, he lifted the fabric high, exposing her thigh and the lace of her underwear to the open air, to the eyes of his partner, to anyone who happened to be walking by. Time seemed to stop. A single, horrified gasp escaped Eva's lips. It wasn't just the exposure, it was the cold, calculated cruelty of it. The use of his uniform, his weapon, his authority, to inflict such a personal and degrading humiliation. It was a symbolic stripping, a violent assertion of power designed to break her spirit. She scrambled to pull her dress down, her hands trembling, her face burning with a shame so intense it felt like a physical blow. Maddox laughed. A deep, ugly, triumphant sound. Davidson, the silent partner, let out a nervous chuckle, the sound of a coward siding with the bully. The world came rushing back in a wave of nausea and white-hot fury. Eva shot to her feet, her body trembling with a volatile mix of trauma and adrenaline. For a split second, the intelligence analyst vanished and the soldier took over. Her mind calculated trajectories, weak points, the precise amount of force needed to shatter Maddox's jaw. She could end him, right here, right now. She could feel the muscle memory in her hands, the phantom weight of a weapon. But she held back. That was the life she had left behind. Using violence would only validate their narrative, give them the excuse they needed. She had to fight this a different way. You, sick bastard, she gasped, the words tearing from her throat. Hot tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not for him. That was sexual assault. That was abuse of power. Maddox just rolled his eyes, utterly unconcerned. He was drunk on his own impunity. Prove it, he sneered. It's your word against two decorated police officers. Who do you think they're gonna believe? Some emotional girl in a park, or the men who protect this city? He had made a critical error. He thought he was dealing with an emotional girl. He had no idea he was dealing with a decorated army captain who had survived IEDs, interrogations, and the soul-crushing weight of war. He thought he was breaking her. He had only just armed her. As Maddox basked in the glow of his perceived victory, something inside Eva shifted. The initial shockwave of trauma began to recede, replaced by a chilling, crystalline clarity. The soldier took a step back, and the intelligence analyst took control. Her mind, trained to operate under extreme duress, began to process the situation not as a victim, but as a mission. Objective, neutralize threat, gather evidence, ensure accountability. Her breathing steadied. Her trembling hands grew still. She raised her head, her ice-blue eyes meeting Maddox's with a focus so intense it made him take an involuntary step back. The look on her face was no longer one of fear or shame. It was one of cold, dispassionate assessment. "You're right, Officer Maddox," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "It is your word against mine. So let's add some more words to the equation." She slowly and deliberately surveyed her surroundings. A retired professor walking his dog had stopped, his face a mask of outrage. A young mother with a stroller was staring, her hand covering her mouth in horror. And most importantly, a teenager on a bike, a little further down the path, had his phone raised, the small red light of a recording blinking steadily. Witnesses. Multiple. Potential video evidence. Good. What are you going to do about it, huh? Maddox taunted, though his bravado now had a brittle edge. He sensed the shift in her demeanor and didn't understand it. Gonna scream and cry some more? No, Eva said quietly. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to threaten you. Her hand moved with practiced slowness into her purse. She didn't retrieve a weapon. She pulled out her smartphone. I'm going to make a phone call. Maddox and Davidson exchanged a look, a mixture of confusion and amusement. Go ahead, Maddox scoffed. Call whoever you want. Nobody's going to help you. You just assaulted the daughter of the man who signs the city's budget, Eva whispered, the words meant only for them. The man who is currently spearheading a federal investigation into your department's corruption. The man whose entire political career has been built on taking down bullies like you. She unlocked her phone, her thumb hovering over a single name on her favorites list, Dad. You have no idea what you've just done, she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a professional delivering a damage assessment. And then she pressed the call button. The sound of the phone ringing on speaker seemed to echo in the suddenly silent park. It rang once. Twice. Eva. Baby girl, what's wrong? The voice that boomed from the phone's small speaker was deep, powerful, and instantly recognizable. It was the voice of District Attorney Eva Rostova. It was the voice that had dominated Atlanta's news cycles for the past year, the voice that corrupt officials had come to fear in their sleep. The color drained from Travis Maddox's face. The red blotches of arrogance vanished, replaced by a pasty, sickly white. Luke Davidson looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He froze, his mouth slightly agape, his eyes wide with a terror so pure it was almost comical. The entire power dynamic of the universe seemed to pivot on that single, paternal question. Eva's legs, which had felt like they were about to give out, suddenly felt as solid as steel. The storm of emotion inside her was still raging, but now it had a target, a direction. Dad, she said, her voice clear and strong. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm in Jefferson Park. And 2 of your city's police officers just assaulted me. She never took her eyes off Maddox as she spoke. She watched his bravado crumble into dust. She watched his sneer melt into a pathetic grimace of panic. She watched as the full, catastrophic weight of his actions came crashing down upon him. The calm was over. The storm had just arrived. The moment the call with his daughter ended, District Attorney Eva Rostova's office transformed from a place of political administration into a war room. The usual hum of government bureaucracy was shattered by a single, thunderous command that echoed down the marble hallways. Get me the head of the Public Integrity Unit. Now. Rostova, a man known for his calculated, chess master approach to law, moved with a speed and fury his staff had never witnessed. This was no longer a political battle against a corrupt system, this was a father's righteous war. He didn't call the police chief. He didn't call the mayor's office. He called his own people, the elite investigators and prosecutors of the Public Integrity Unit, the very division he had created to hunt down and prosecute corrupt officials. They were his scalpels, his hammers, and he was about to unleash them. Back in Jefferson Park, the aftermath of the call was a tableau of frozen panic. Maddox and Davidson stood as if petrified, the blood drained from their faces. The crowd of witnesses, sensing a monumental shift, drew closer, their phones still recording, capturing every nuance of the officer's dawning horror. Within 10 minutes, the first vehicle arrived. It wasn't a black and white patrol car. It was a sleek, unmarked sedan. 2 men in sharp, dark suits stepped out. They were not police, they were investigators from the DA's office. They approached the scene with a quiet, lethal efficiency. Officers Maddox, Davidson, the lead investigator said, his voice devoid of any emotion. You are to surrender your service weapons, your badges, and your communication devices. You are hereby placed on administrative leave pending a criminal investigation. Do not speak to anyone. Do not move from this spot. Maddox opened his mouth to protest, to bluster, to lie, but the words died in his throat. He saw the cold, implacable look in the investigator's eyes and knew it was over. The shield of his badge had just dissolved. With trembling hands, he unclipped his weapon and handed it over. Davidson followed suit, looking as if he were about to be physically ill. What unfolded next was a masterclass in systematic takedown. The DA's team moved with surgical precision. While the 2 officers were being formally detained and separated, other investigators began to canvass the crowd, collecting witness statements and, most importantly, copies of the video footage from a dozen different angles. A formidable civil rights attorney from the DA's office, a woman Eva knew had a reputation for shredding police unions in court, arrived to personally take Eva's statement. Eva, drawing on her intelligence training, gave a perfect, dispassionate account. She detailed every word, every gesture, every nuance of the encounter. She provided the investigators with a psychological profile of both men, Maddox as the aggressive, narcissistic ringleader, and Davidson as the weak-willed follower, motivated by fear and a desire for pure acceptance. Her statement was not that of a hysterical victim, it was the clinical, damning testimony of a professional analyst. Within the hour, the system that was designed to protect men like Maddox was being used to systematically dismantle them. Warrants were issued not just for their personnel files, but for their phone records, their social media histories, their financial statements. The investigation was not just about the assault in the park, it was about exposing the entire culture that allowed it to happen. The findings were swift and damning. Maddox had 3 prior complaints of sexual harassment against female citizens, all of them quietly buried by his precinct captain and the union. Davidson had 2 excessive force complaints, both involving verbal abuse directed at women during traffic stops. The investigation also uncovered a series of text messages between Maddox and several other officers, filled with misogynistic jokes and angry rants about District Attorney Rostova's war on cops. They had seen Eva in the park, recognized her, and Maddox had reportedly said to Davidson, "Let's go teach the DA's little princess a lesson." The targeted, political nature of the assault was now undeniable. It wasn't just a random act of cruelty, it was a deliberate act of intimidation against the highest law enforcement official in the county. They had tried to humiliate the DA by violating his daughter. In doing so, they had handed him the very weapon he needed to burn their world to the ground. The courtroom was a crucible, the air thick with anticipation. The case of the people versus Maddox and Davidson had become the most high-profile trial in the city's recent history. It was more than just an assault case, it was a referendum on power, privilege, and the soul of the city's police force. Maddox and Davidson, now civilians in ill-fitting suits, looked like hollowed-out versions of their former selves. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, sweating fear. The prosecution, led by the DA's top trial attorney, presented an ironclad case. They had the videos from a dozen angles. They had the testimony of multiple, credible witnesses, including a lawyer who had witnessed the entire event. They had the text messages proving intent. But the most powerful moment came when Eva Rostova took the stand. She walked to the witness box with the same calm, steady gait she had used to cross the park. She wore a simple, professional black suit. Her voice, as she answered the prosecutor's questions, was clear, precise, and unshakable. She recounted the events of that day without tears, without overt anger. She presented the facts with the clinical accuracy of an intelligence briefing. When the defense attorney tried to cross-examine her, tried to imply she had been provocative, or that she had misinterpreted a joke, Eva's demeanor shifted. A flicker of the soldier returned. "Counselor," she said, her ice blue eyes locking onto his, "I have been interrogated by enemy combatants in a war zone. I assure you, I can tell the difference between a joke and a threat. What Officer Maddox did was an act of dominance and humiliation, intended to intimidate not just me, but my father. It was a calculated abuse of power. And his partner's silence was its accomplice." The defense attorney sat down. He had no more questions. The verdict was swift. Guilty. On all counts. Aggravated assault, abuse of authority, and the most serious charge, conspiracy to obstruct justice through witness intimidation. The sentences were severe. Maddox received the maximum, 10 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 7. Davidson, for his cooperation, received 3 years and a lifetime ban from any form of law enforcement employment. The police union statement was terse. The city council immediately ratified the creation of a permanent civilian oversight board with full subpoena power, a project Eva's father had been fighting for years. Months later, the willow tree in Jefferson Park swayed in the autumn breeze. Eva sat on the same bench, but this time, she was not alone. Her father, Alexander Rostova, sat beside her. The yellow dress was gone, replaced by comfortable jeans and a simple sweater. The book in her lap was a journal. "Heard from the VA today," she said quietly, not looking at him. "They've approved the funding for the pilot program." After the trial, Eva had poured her energy into a new mission. Working with her father's office and local veterans groups, she had designed a program, the Rostova Initiative, to provide legal aid and advocacy for female veterans who had been victims of harassment or assault, both in and out of uniform. "I knew they would," her father said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You built an airtight case, Captain." She finally looked at him, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "I had a good teacher." They sat in comfortable silence, a father and daughter who had walked through fire together and emerged on the other side, scarred but stronger. The memory of the assault was still there, a phantom limb of trauma she would carry forever. But it was no longer her master. She had taken the worst moment of her life and forged it into a weapon for others. The pain had not disappeared. It had been given a purpose. This story is a powerful testament to the strength it takes to confront abuse, especially when it comes from those in power. It reminds us that dignity is not something that can be taken, only surrendered, and that true justice requires unwavering courage. What part of Eva's journey resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story of resilience and accountability moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories that matter, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. And comment "Justice" to show your support.